Good day everyone. So today I will be discussing about the guidelines in grading performance tasks and essays.
For our lesson introduction, what are the general guidelines in grading performance tasks? So, utmost care should be observed to ensure that grading practices are equitable, fair, and meaningful to learners and other stakeholders. It is therefore important that when constructing a test or performance task, the methods criteria for grading learners' responses or answers should be specified. So, when we grade performance tasks, we need to ensure that our grading is fair and equitable for the learners. In doing so, it is essential to consider the purpose of the assessment, the ability levels of the entire group being tested, and the nature of the task to be performed. In this lesson, we will be tackling about how we grades or guidelines in grading performance tasks. So, the following are the general guidelines in grading tests or performance tasks. First is stick to the purpose of the assessment. Before coming up with an assessment, it is important to determine the purpose of the test. So, before tayo magbigay ng test, kailangan muna natin ma-determine or kung about saan yung test na gagawin natin. Will the assessment be used for diagnostic purposes? Will it be a formative assessment or is it a summative assessment? Diagnostic and formative assessments are generally not graded. So, alam naman na natin yung diagnostics and mga assessments, diba? The diagnostic assessments are primarily used to gather feedback about the learner's prior knowledge or misconception before the start of a learning activity. So, yung diagnostic assessment is ginagawa siya before we start the activity or the lesson. While results from formative assessments are used to determine what learners need to improve on or what topic or course contents need to be addressed and given emphasis by the teacher. So, yung formative assessments naman is ginagamit siya ng mga teachers para malaman kung ano pa yung mga kailangan i-improve ng mga students or anong kailangan nilang tutukan na hindi masyadong naintindihan ng mga students. Formative assessment results are also to be used with learners to reflect on and monitor their own learning and therefore should not be graded. On the other hand, an assessment that is used as a summative evaluation should be assigned a grade as it is aimed to determine how well the learners will be able to achieve the desired learning outcome. That is why we need to stick to the purpose of our assessment because to identify or determine what the students or the learners need. Second, be guided by the desired learning outcomes. The learners should be informed early on what are expected of them insofar as learning outcomes are considered, as well as how they will be assessed and graded in the test. So, mahalaga ding ipaalam natin bilang teachers kung paano natin magigradean at kung ano mga criteria na gagawin natin sa pag-grade sa mga students, such as information can be disseminated through the course syllabus or during course introduction. So, tulad ng ginagawa ng mga teachers natin na pinapakita or dinidiscuss muna nila sa atin yung mga course syllables na magagamit natin during the whole class. So, the test or performance task that will be conducted in the class should only include and focus on the intended learning outcomes in the specific topics specified. The test includes items that have not been discussed or are not part of the course syllabus. These items should not be included in the computation of the final test score. So, pag nagpapa-exam tayo or nagpapa-test tayo nang wala naman sa syllabus is hindi natin siya pwedeng isama or kasama sa kukumpitin natin bilang final test score. And we need to stick only with the learning outcomes. 3. Develop grading criteria. Grading criteria to be used in traditional tests and performance tasks should be made clear to the students. Similarly, learners should also be informed of the weight of each criterion. Grading criteria and weights should be applied fairly and consistently. A holistic or analytic rubric can be used to map out the grading criteria. So, before tayo magpa-tests or exams sa students is kailangan alam nila or magpa-activity, kailangan alam nila yung mga grading criteria na magiging base natin sa pag-grade sa kanila.
Developing grading criteria may be tedious, however, having clear criteria can save time in grading process. So, pag meron tayong clear criteria as a teacher is masisave yung time ng grading process natin. Makes the grading process more consistent and fair. Magiging fair yung pag-grade natin sa ating mga students. And communicates expectations to learners. Alam ng mga students kung ano yung dapat nilang gawin and kung ano yung i-expect natin sa kanila. And helps learners understand how their work is graded. So, by having grading criteria is malalaman ng mga students kung paano natin sila grinigradean.
Fourth, inform learners what scoring methods are to be used. Learners should be more made aware before the start of testing whether their test responses are to be scored based on the number right, negative marking, or through non-conventional scoring methods.
As such, the learners will be guided on how to mark their responses during the test. Such instruction should be followed and applied consistently to every learner in the same class or other learners in the same course but different classes. So, inform learners what scoring methods are to be used is very important for the learners to know what they need to focus on. Fifth, decide on what type of test scores to use. As discussed earlier, there are different ways by which students' learning can be measured and presented. Performance in a particular test can be measured and reported through raw scores, percentage scores, criterion reference scores, or norm reference scores. It is important that different types of grading scheme be used for different tests, assignments, or performance tasks. Learners should also be informed at the start of what grading system is to be used for a particular test or task. Alagang malaman ng mga students na kung ano yung gagamiting test or grading system ng teacher para mas madaling nilang ma-distinguish kung saang part sila mag-focus. So, let's move forward. Now, we're going to discuss about the general guidelines in grading essay tests. Essays require more time to grade than the other types of traditional tests. Grading essays tests can also be influenced by extraneous factors, such as learners' handwriting legibility and raters' biases. So, di ba minsan, is kinigrade tayo ng mga teachers natin kung paano natin isulat ang essays natin by kung paano readable yung ating mga handwritten. It is therefore important that you devise essay questions, prompts, and grading scheme procedures that will minimize the threats to the validity and reliability. Scoring essay responses can be made more rigorous by developing a scoring scheme. The following are the general guidelines in scoring essay tests. First is, identify the criteria for rating the essay. The criteria or standards for evaluating the essay should be predetermined. Some of the criteria that can be used include content, organization, format, grammar, proficiency. So, di ba pag nagpapagawa yung mga prof natin ng essay is meron silang binibigay na criteria. Development and support, focus in details, etc. It is important that the specific standards and criteria included are relevant to the type of performance task given. So, mahalaga yung criteria sa pagsusulat ng essay test para alam natin kung paano gigradein yung mga students. Second is determine the type of rubric to use. There are two basic types of rubric, holistic or analytic scoring system. Holistic rubrics require evaluating the essays and taking into consideration all the criteria. So, pag holistic scoring system is kino-consider dito yung criteria na binigay ng teacher sa pagpapagawa ng essay. Only a single score is given based on the overall judgment of the learner's rating. Holistic rubric is viewed to be more convenient for the teachers as it requires less area or aspect of writing to evaluate. However, it does not provide specific feedback on what course, topic, or content or area that the students are weak in and need an improvement. Holistic rubric is a single scale with all the criteria being included in evaluation together. On the other hand, analytic scoring system requires that the essay is evaluated based on each of the criteria. It provides useful feedback on learners' strengths and weaknesses for each course content or criterion. So, analytic scoring is dito nagbibigay ng comments ang teachers on how to enhance learners' strengths and weaknesses. Third is preparing the rubric. In developing rubric, the skills and competencies related to essay writing should first be identified. These skills and competencies represent the criteria. Then, performance benchmarks and point values are determined. Performance marks can be numerical categories, but the most frequently used are descriptors with corresponding rating scales. So, this is an example of a rating scale. Nakalagay dito yung point values, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And sample performance benchmarks. Number 1 is needs improvement, beginning, novice, or inadequate. Number 2 is satisfactory, developing, apprentice, and developing. 3 is good, accomplished, proficient, or proficient. And 4th is exemplary, exceptional, distinguished, and skilled. Fourth is evaluate essay anonymously. Checking essay should be done anonymously. It is important that the rater does not identify whose paper he or she is rating. Anonymously grading keeps the students' works or fair or neutral. Fifth, score one essay question at a time. This is not to ensure that the same thinking standards are applied for all learners in the class. The rater should try to avoid any distraction or interruption when evaluating the same item. Sixth, be conscious of own biases when evaluating a paper. The rate should not be affected by learners' handwriting, writing style, length of responses, and the other factors. So, pag nag-check tayo ng essays, hindi natin kailangan tingnan yung handwriting ng students or the writing style and kung gaano kahaba yung response ng students. He or she should stick to the criteria included in the rubric when evaluating the essay. Kailangan natin mag-stick sa criteria pag nag-grade tayo ng essay. 7. Review initial scores and comments before giving the final rating. This is important especially for essays that were initially given barely passing or failing grade. So, kailangan natin i-check ng maigi ang gawa ng mga students natin before tayo magbibigay ng final rating. 8. Get 2 or more raters for essays that are high stake, such as those used for admission, placement, or scholarship screening purposes. The final grade will be the average of all ratings given. So, kailangan natin magbigay or manghingi ng other opinions sa essays na i-check natin kung para to sa admission or scholarship ng isang student para maiwasan ang pagkakamali or maling pagbibigay ng grade. 9. Write comments next to the learner's responses to provide feedback on how well one has performed in the essay test. So, 'di ba, meron minsan yung mga teachers natin naglalagay sila ng comments sa mga essays natin or sa maling mga nilalagay natin doon para maitama at para ma-provide na din yung feedback na sa ginawa natin. Para sa next na gagawin natin yung essay is meron na tayong idea kung ano yung mga mali at tama. That ends my report. For my conclusion, it is important for us future educators to learn these guidelines in grading performance tasks and essays so that kung papagawa natin ito sa mga students natin someday is meron na tayong idea kung paano yung tamang pag-grade ng performance task and essays and kung ano yung mga kailangan natin tandaan at isaalang-alang sa pag-grade ng essays and performance task. Thank you for listening.